This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome our next incredible guest, Mr. Dru Carpenter from Yuzu. Welcome, Dru.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure to have you along for the ride today. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you today about all things digital, e-commerce, and logistics mainly, because I think that's your background. But before we get into everything that Yuzu is and does, why don't you tell us how you got to be in this space? Started out selling on eBay, and then you've done other things in the periphery of digital. But why don't you tell us how you got into it?
Yeah, for sure. So I started in e-commerce about 10 years ago, which is weird for someone that's 24. But yeah, started selling on eBay when I was 14. Had my own eBay and PayPal accounts, which got restricted at several points throughout that process due to being under 18. But yeah, was reselling products through eBay throughout college. I then joined a company called Habu. At the time, had about 30 people. For context, that's a European ShipBob equivalent. They were fulfilling some of my eBay products. And that was very much their positioning at the time during COVID. I was there for a couple of years, onboarded over 100 brands, and then moved on to building an early stage direct mail business. And then that's brought me nicely onto Yuzu, which is offline print, but integrated into 3PLs and fulfillment processes.
Yes, and I must say thank you very much for the gift pack you sent to me, the merch pack. It was a very impressive box of goodies there, a hat, a candle, and some other really nice looking things. Obviously shows a little bit of what you guys are capable of over at Yuzu, but what gave you the idea to try to create a technology that allowed brands to merge the offline and online experience?
Yeah, for sure. So at Habu, I'd run through RFP processes and onboardings with brands where they'd really want to maintain that sort of personal touch that they were doing when fulfilling in-house. So we're talking about things like handwritten notes from the founders, even down to gift messages or PR and event packages where people would want personalized messaging, as well as even simple things like branded invoices, right? Uploading your brand logo, your brand fonts to an invoice is surprisingly difficult with many WMS systems. Then joined that early stage direct mail business with a couple of others there. And we led that company for a few years. And we started to deal more and more with e-commerce, especially during the COVID sort of peak. And we just started thinking, really, how can we actually integrate this into a 3PL and fulfillment team's process? We've got the experience between us. But we don't want to keep seeing postage rate increases and an increased cost for direct mail as a service, which has just naturally been happening over the last few years. And how can we actually make that unboxing experience more impactful? So that's a roundabout way of where we've got to it today. But yeah, I've been building it for a few years now. And yeah, I'm glad you like the VIP box.
Yes, no, it was very good. And I almost see you guys as a next iteration. Maybe this is an incorrect way to contextualize what you do, but I think of what Postpilot does, and they allow you to bring physical direct mail into what would traditionally be a digital flow, right? So let's say you've got Klaviyo, or you've got some other marketing automation platform, and you want to effectively bring physical mail into your flow, similar to how you would send an email flow or a follow-up flow or an abandoned cart flow or whatever it might be. And their vision always was to make it just as easy to have one node in a flow to be a physical piece of mail versus a digital piece of mail or an SMS, etc. That was their vision. And I almost think of you guys as a similar technology, but obviously very different in the sense that this is all part of the order management flow as opposed to a marketing automation flow. So I feel like you guys sit between what would traditionally fall into the WMS end of the fulfillment flow as part of what a 3PL, or for that matter, even if it's your own warehouse. So you still need some sort of technology, because most WMSs do not have what you have, or they do not offer what you offer. I've implemented PeopleVox before inside of a brand as working in e-com management inside of a brand. So I know what your traditional WMS looks like. And most of them do not have insertion flows, right? That's just not what they think about. So I feel like you've inserted yourself directly in the middle of what would traditionally be part of an OMS or a WMS flow, but the whole vision, as I understand it, is to create an unboxing experience that's a whole lot less generic than just simply having a pick list in a box.
Exactly, yeah. And I think the analogy to Postpilot is valid. It's an emergence of offline channels that were once used for every brand and was the de facto, and it's now becoming the trendy new thing. Insert swaps aren't a new practice, or insert flows, they're not new. Lots of brands were doing that inside mailers 20 years ago, and lots of brands were sending direct mail 20 years ago. There's place for both channels, and we've got customers that are using Postpilot and using us. And yeah, you're exactly right on the order management piece. Whereas Postpilot and Klaviyo, to a certain extent for email, you can target any customer or any cohort at a period of time and speak to them. What we're doing is order management focus. So in every order, we're personalizing that experience and that journey for each customer. And from a 3PL and WMS function, again, historically, they're focused on getting orders out each day, right? And we want to streamline into that process, but we also want to get brands involved in that process a little bit more. Let them A/B test and iterate on different inserts and different customer journeys. Most importantly, without disrupting that fulfillment flow, without a WMS or 3PL team looking at the word personalization and thinking, actually, I don't want to deal with that, because at peak periods, when we're running manual processes, something's going to go wrong. We're automating it, we're integrating it into the WMS system. And then ultimately a brand or marketing manager can come into our platform and they can iterate these new creatives, they can A/B test and set up all of these programs. And from a WMS or 3PL perspective, it's the same as printing a shipping label, right? Each one's got unique content, but it doesn't matter because it's printed at the right time. Everything's working in line and they're getting orders out the door efficiently. Yeah, it's very much optimized for them in mind, as you will know from that 3PL and the warehouse experience that we have internally already.
Yeah, and so when you guys set up the technology, does this flow into the WMS as a unique SKU effectively on the order that needs to be fulfilled as part of the order, or do you treat it more as part of the pick, pack, dispatch process and flow? And presumably this requires you to have many integrations to many WMSs and to understand how they all work, from fulfill to PeopleVox to which hails from your homeland, to every kind of across the chain. It feels like integrations become a core part of kind of your value prop.
They are a core part of the product, and from both perspectives, really, from a warehouse and automation and WMS integration perspective, but also from an actual access to data perspective. So we're integrating not just into Shopify, but other sales channels, but then Klaviyo and the rest of the marketing app stack to basically get access to everything that brand knows about a customer to personalize more effectively. But you're exactly right. The integration and the workflow is completely different for each warehouse setup to a certain extent. So you've got a brand that's printing through Shopify, or they're using ShipStation for the first time and they want to integrate this, where we're integrating with their batch print process. Maybe they're doing 50 labels at a time. We're making sure these are printing in the same sortation and they're happy to hand match and actually push those orders out each day. All the way through to integrations with tools like Manhattan Associates, which is almost custom each time. And the 3PL environment wants to have a barcode on each insert, which they can scan to verify it as a pick before it leaves the dispatch bay, so they can mark it to an individual packer and track mispicks and make sure everything's working efficiently. So there's a real spectrum. We integrate with about 25 WMS systems currently. We're integrating with new ones all of the time. And our SLA internally is to turn around a new WMS integration within a week for new brands that are wanting to onboard with us. It's one of our biggest friction points. So it's something we're working on all the time.
Wow. And did you guys ever consider going down the path of, look, if we integrate with the major iPaaS platforms instead, or as a primary integration point, whether it's a Patchworks, whether it's a Jitterbit, whether it's a Zapier, whether it's a Make, whatever it is, oftentimes these middleware platforms are part and parcel. They sit between the OMS and the WMS, if there is a WMS, and in some cases, they sit between the OMS and a pick, pack, dispatch platform in a manually managed warehouse, because not all warehouses are automated with the WMS. Sometimes it's really just a carrier aggregator integration that pulls down orders directly from an e-commerce system, as opposed to a full-blown end-to-end WMS with pick segmentation and everything else going on, right?
Yeah, so it's a really good point, and we've definitely, not hackily, but I suppose put together some Zapier automation workflows to get things to work for customers in instances. I think that the real difficulty there is that ultimately what we're trying to do is trigger this insert to print automatically. So the picker packer doesn't have to leave their WMS or whatever other software. They're doing what they're doing in their day-to-day process, and this is just printing automatically based on us listening to those processes. And the challenge that we've had with different iPaaS tools is it just comes down to when you're trying to standardize data and integrations, sometimes you're not thinking of those workarounds to get something to print at the right time within a fulfillment process. So let's say I know that a certain printer that we stock for a 3PL takes 20 seconds or 10 seconds to print something, and they want it on the final tote pick scan when they're checking out an order versus another 3PL that wants something slightly different. I do want to shout out Trackstar, which is it's an API for WMSs, which we do integrate with and helps us from a data ingest perspective. They've been really helpful for some integrations. But yeah, it comes down to that print trigger ultimately is what the added complexity is and why we've sometimes had to avoid just generalizing the solution with iPaaS tools.
And how do you deal with 3PLs that don't have full color glossy print capabilities, or they don't have the capability? Because in my experience, the vast majority of 3PLs, like, they're using black and white laser printers for their pick list. They're using black and white for their packing slips. They're using black and white laser printers for almost everything except for maybe a zebra label printer for the shipping label that then goes on a parcel or a satchel or something like that. So not every 3PL is perhaps as advanced as what I received from you was like full gloss, high res. This was it looked like it had been printed in bulk by a professional printer. It didn't look like it had been printed on the fly at the moment of pack by a 3PL in some warehouse somewhere.
Yep. So most 3PLs, when we're speaking to them, we are sourcing new hardware ultimately to get up and running with this. But the majority of the prints that you received were printed on $1,000 printer, which is also available on lease plans. So although there is a price difference there, and ultimately there is the sourcing of new hardware, we do incentivize warehouses and ultimately brands with that workflow to get things up and running. We do that by cleverly as well. So some of the gloss and some of the finish that you're talking about, and there's nuances to all of this stuff depending on the different hardware ultimately, but we're pre-printing certain elements on occasion. So like maybe a back design or some elements of a front design, and then we're dynamically printing the rest of the content to achieve a finished output that isn't too dissimilar from the marketing insert that you buy from a print house that's got a $30,000 or $40,000 machine sitting in their warehouse. So ultimately it is most of the time new hardware. We have optimized our hardware recommendations as well as managed service providers to get something that not only achieves a nice output for a brand, but is printing quickly, reliably, and is a small enough footprint to fit comfortably on a packing bench. So again, it's just a balance of looking after the two stakeholders ultimately, the person in the warehouse and then the marketing manager that wants the best possible output for their customers.
And how did you set up your first go-to-market motion? How did you find these brands because obviously for a brand, they have to see such value in a personalized insert that they go, hey, first of all, we want your technology. Second of all, we want to pay the 3PL for the service of dynamic print on demand per pick. So there's a fee for your technology. There's a fee for the 3PL to do the extra step effectively at the point of pick pack dispatch. And they have to see enough value because most 3PLs, in my experience, if you went down to a print house, an offset print house, and had 1 million inserts printed, they're more than happy to have those sitting on a print table and have those go into every one of your parcels, right? But obviously, that's not the level of personalization that you're delivering, right? So, from my perspective, the brand has to have such a focus on the customer experience that they want to spend that extra money for the personalization layer. That's how I see it, but maybe you see it differently.
Yeah, so it's a tricky one in terms of communication and go to market because there's so many different use cases ultimately that we can talk to a brand about, and it completely differs brand to brand. I would say that there's a few sort of there's a few wedges that get us through the door that we can then land and expand from. And those really come down to those core use cases that brands are already asking for or having to deal with manual processes for their 3PL to actually function for. So that comes down to gift messaging, handwritten looking founder style notes, branded invoices, as well as influencer and PR packages. So maybe when we're landing with brands, we're dealing with 10% of their actual throughput from an order volume perspective. But then the 3PL is going, yeah, I don't have to handwrite notes anymore. Or, yeah, I can offer this value add to this customer that I've been trying to close for 6 months that won't work with us because we can't offer PR notes. So we really do communicate that directly to the 3PLs. We're not expecting them to start sell the full marketing solution. We're expecting them to pick up on conversations with their brands where they're hearing these things. They're hearing gift messages where we don't want them on a shipping label or a packing slip. They're looking at these better experiences that are low lift. And then ultimately the brand comes into the platform and they see everything that they can do with it and they get really excited about it. I think also the buzzword for 3PLs is personalization, but ultimately when they get in a conversation with us and they see how much it's been streamlined ultimately from a 3PL and WMS perspective, they're happy to go and work with us. Because you talk about a 3PL that's happy to have 1 million inserts printed and put on a packing bench. But if you're talking about a 3PL that's got 90 packing benches and every customer of theirs wants 1 or 2 inserts, and they've got to try and coordinate both orders going to the right packing bench and then inserting the right generic insert without any issues or mispicks or any other problems, at scale that becomes unfeasible ultimately, and is actually a worse off solution for the 3PL in terms of their day-to-day functioning, because they're doing something there that isn't integrated into their WMS process. It's not verified and ultimately can lead to mistakes.
And so who is your customer typically? Is it the brand themselves and you have a contract directly with the brand, or is it typically the 3PL's the customer, they consume your service via API, it injects it into their workflow, you're integrated into the customer's workflow, and then they effectively on-bill the customer for that value-added service that they're now providing, or is it a mix of both approaches?
It's a mix of both. Right now, it's almost always the brand that's introducing us to their 3PL as a stakeholder. But over the last few months, especially, we've launched a 3PL partner offer where they're still not our customer, but we actually say to them, look, if you want to offer gift messages to your customers, we'll give you access to our software free of charge. Just get them up and running with it. You pay for the hardware. And then look, if the brand wants to use us for dynamic discounting, local retail upsells based on a customer zip code, all of these other great use cases, then they can just pay us a software fee to upsell to that sort of feature gate. Most of the time it's the brand. Ultimately, we want to speak to the brand to get them the best use of the platform and those marketing use cases and deliver ROIs. But the 3PL is a key partner throughout both processes. And we're seeing more and more popularity with 3PLs who, they look at, okay, gift messaging free of charge. I've got 10 brands I'm working with that want to do this at the moment, and I don't really have a process. And they're working as a channel for us there too.
And let's talk about some of the personalization options or personalization segmentation that you guys already do out of the box. And then obviously, presumably you can customize this for the brand in new ways that maybe you don't do yet, I'm guessing. But you do things with dynamic discounts. You do things to promote the subscription model if a brand has that. You do things around loyalty and memberships that are personalized to the customer. Maybe it's they're starting to get close to the next level of unlock for the next level or tier of a membership or loyalty program. So let's talk through some of the things that you guys have already developed that are out of the box, plug and play, that are very common levels of personalization that a brand wants you to initiate on their behalf.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're approaching these conversations with brands, we're almost always looking at their tech stack in the first instance and what they've prioritized as online initiatives, because ultimately those are the core sort of key KPIs and things that we want to transfer to an offline format. So exactly, if we're working with a subscription brand, we're looking at, okay, so how do we want to change the messaging in each order for month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4? Is month 4 a specific churn risk point? Do we want to offer the customer the ability to gift or skip that subscription? Is there a specific upskill or learning initiative that's needed in month 1 to get them to engage and ultimately go onto the second box of a subscription. So things like that. But then also, if we're working with a brand that's got thousands of different SKUs, let's say, okay, maybe the priority here is product education and product recommendations. So, let's say they've ordered 4 different items in their basket and we've got 1,000 plus SKUs. Let's tailor the insert to specific education for those products they've purchased. And let's maybe integrate with a tool like Rebuy or other systems to insert dynamic product recommendations based on what that customer's purchase history is. Or let's say we're a brand who's just launched a new retail location in New York City and we want to target customers that purchase with a radius of 30 miles from that location for 2 weeks. And we want to offer them a rebate function and a map and something cool to get them in store. Okay, we'll look at their zip code, we'll look at their radius to that location, and we'll insert a dynamic map with instructions on how to visit that store, when they should visit it to drive some action. Integrations with loyalty apps, referral apps, influencer outreach apps. There's a variety of use cases. It really does come down to the brand, but those are some of the cool ones.
And do you, in the same way that you say, hey, look, within a week, we're going to integrate with any new WMS that we come across that a 3PL has that we don't yet support?
Yeah.
Is it the same kind of thing on the other side, the brand side integrations with your Klaviyo's, with your Yotpo's, with all the different platforms that can give you valuable segmentation data and valuable messaging data? Is it a scenario where it's case by case? A customer has a new piece of their tech stack that you've never integrated with before, but you need to for whatever reason for personalization, and you go, yep, we don't integrate with that yet, but give us a week or give us 2 weeks or give us a month and we will.
It is that approach. I would say that we're lucky to a certain extent that tools like Klaviyo have become almost de facto app integrators, in the sense that almost every app integrates into Klaviyo or integrates into Shopify or Yotpo. So when we have those key integrations, most of the time we can just fetch that data from a Klaviyo customer profile or a certain segment, which has covered almost all bases to date. We do also do things with, if we need to, with Shopify Flow or other systems to get access to the data or configure some certain logic. But then ultimately, yes, in the same vein, we're integrating with different marketing apps all the time. We've got an upvote function within the App Store on our platform, so people can upvote requested integrations and we can make that happen for them. I think ultimately, the more data that we have access to, the better and more effective the platform becomes for the brands we're working with. We haven't had an instance yet where we've got some data that we haven't been able to get access to.
Love it. Now, throughout this whole entire discussion thus far, it sounds like you're super retail focused, like you're D2C and B2C focused. However, I see a world, because of the world I work in so heavily now, B2B. And B2B, there are levels of personalization that you can do in the B2B world that are just impossible in the B2C and D2C world, because oftentimes it's wisdom of the crowd personalization in the B2C world. It's in aggregate personalization that is generic personalization for a customer. You don't even need to know who they are necessarily, because, okay, cool, they fit because of their purchase history or what they've done and their behavior. We're going to slot them into a specific segment based on their behavior. Whereas in the B2B world, we know these customers so well. We know so much more about them. We know exactly who they are. We know who in the org is doing the buying, because of course that hierarchy sits in a CRM or in an ERP somewhere. We know what their unique pricing is. We know what their unique MOQs are. We just know so much more about them. We know what categories they regularly buy from. We know what kind of journey they have with us from a freighting perspective. Sometimes it's coming from our warehouse. Sometimes it's being drop shipped. Sometimes it's being shipped by a 3PL. So we've got this really intimate relationship with B2B customers that you don't have in the B2C and D2C world. And so I'm wondering, do you see a opportunity for you guys to uniquely position yourself as this personalization layer for your B2B customers' experience? Or do you think the reality is, if it's a manufacturer shipping to a distributor, it's probably being unboxed by a warehouse manager who's a receipting manager that then is putting it away on a shelf to be shipped ultimately to their dealers or their customers that are actually using the goods? So do you see an opportunity to work in the B2B world, or do you think actually, whilst we could personalize to a unique level of the B2B world, maybe there's not as much opportunity for us to create a unique experience. But then again, you've got a lot of D2C brands that are selling wholesale volumes, and so they have strategic wholesale customers. So I wonder what the B2B opportunity looks like to you.
Yeah, sure. I'll be upfront in saying it's not an area I've explored massively, but the nice thing is that we get customers doing different things with the tools that we wouldn't expect them to necessarily. So I think when we're talking about B2B, it's somewhat analogous to the influencer PR space in that you have a personal relationship with someone and you'd like to write a personal note to that person. And ultimately, quite a lot of the time, leave some form of call to action or reference for an engagement point. So for different tools, so influencer, PR, and we have seen customers do this for corporate gifting and other platforms, as well as customers doing this when communicating to their wholesalers. We make it super easy to write a personal note. So if you've just spoken to someone and they've placed an order and you want to write a note to them and it's, hey, first name, really great to reference from our conversation the other day. Here's a QR code with, give me a call anytime if you need any support, if you need any help, or give me a QR code if you want to repurchase, or whatever other call to action that we want to do there. That's all really easy to do through the platform. Ultimately, each QR code that we're producing as well is unique per order. So we can track individual recipient or order scans to then start to gauge intent and engagement from our customers. Now the value of that is great from an aggregated D2C perspective, where let's say someone's scanned a QR code and they've gone through to a landing page but haven't completed the call to action. Maybe, okay, they've engaged with the content. I want to drop text within an hour that follows a similar call to action to actually drive further engagement. But also when people start keeping these inserts for 30, 45, 60 days, we can track those QR codes throughout that time period. So we can make that online experience really impactful and provide a holistic overview. But that becomes ever more important when the stakeholder that you're sending the order to is more important to you as a brand. So whether that's a wholesaler, whether that's an influencer, you see a QR code scan, maybe you want us to feed that through to a Slack channel notification so you can give the person a buzz. And again, you can track that over that time period. There's a ton of opportunities there. I'll be upfront in saying it's not something that I've thought about massively or explored too much to date, but I do know some of our customers are doing it and I do see the opportunity there for it to be really impactful. I think the concern I would have is around the insert getting lost in the size of the order, right? If someone's ordering like one wholesale box or a few boxes and there's one insert, okay, they're going to see that. If it's 3 pallets, then maybe they're not going to see the A5 in or A6 or whatever size insert that's inside one of the boxes.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Certainly wholesale volumes it starts to beg the question, where do we actually put the insert? Do we put in the plastic wrap that's on that goes around the pallet and then it sits on the top of the cartons so when they rip the plastic wrap off, they see the insert directly on the top of one of the cartons. How do we meaningfully get that into a scenario where the person who is receiving the goods or receipting the goods, because oftentimes the person receiving the goods isn't the person who's going to be using the goods. And so this is the challenge, is that they aren't necessarily the consumer of the goods. No, that makes complete sense. But I also understand a scenario where if we have unique QR codes, then we can tailor the experience. We can actually even tailor landing pages to that cohort of customers or to that individual customer if we have the backend systems to be able to dynamically generate those landing pages that are personalized for the customer. So I can see a scenario where that it becomes really impactful, because it's, oh my gosh, they tailored an entire workflow, an entire experience just for me, and maybe recommend specific products almost like on a custom category page just for me. Wow, that's wild. And I feel like that then be integrated in further in with something like a Verbolia or something like that creates SEO optimized landing pages at scale. It feels like that level of integration could create a really seamless end-to-end experience for the customer that truly starts to merge that online offline experience. So yeah, I could see a scenario where that would be super impactful, and I as the consumer would feel like, oh my gosh, they've put a lot of thought into this workflow that they've built around me.
Yep. You need to build this for us. We need to chat offline and make this happen.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think at the very least, I can make some introductions to some partners that would, I think, make a pretty interesting addition to your integration stack, because they're already doing some of the things that you would want in a workflow. They're already doing some of those things anyway. So why not why not fuse the best of all worlds together as part of your workflow? And what's next for you guys? If I was to look out 6, 12, 18 months, is there anything your customers are asking for today that you don't do? Or are there any other gaps in the market that you say, hey, look, we just don't do this in our platform today, but we see this as an opportunity that we're going to go hammer and tongs at until we solve it?
Yeah, I think that you're going to see continued 3PL expansion, especially as a play. Really, I don't want to have a conversation with a brand where they're mentioning a 3PL that we haven't heard of before. I'd like it so that every 3PL they're mentioning, and I've had that a few times this week where they've mentioned a 3PL and I say, yeah, we spoke to them a couple of weeks ago. They're implemented with 2 customers. Let's get this up and running in the next couple of days. So I think that continued 3PL expansion piece and that looks to try and solve 3PL pain points as much as we can, and also a continued efficiency on the time to print to make sure that this is really seamless from a 3PL WMS perspective. But then also direct partnerships with WMS partners. So we've recently partnered directly with ShipHero as our preferred WMS partner, and they've been doing some really great things for us too. And then also continued expansion of use cases. So I think the one that we're focused on a lot right now is the loyalty and retail functions. So dynamic loyalty points, as well as displaying dynamic loyalty actions for the brands that they're working with, as well as retail upsells. So dynamic maps and giving customers the ability to just upload a CSV of their stores and making that super slick and streamlined from a brand perspective. I think, look, we're only getting started here transparently. We're looking to build out the playbooks as we're continuing to build the products, build out the initial templates, build out relationships with agencies, and ultimately follow a model of a tool like Klaviyo or a tool like Postpilot, where you become the go-to for a certain medium, and then you make it really easy for brands ultimately to get on the platform and get started. And that's educating the market on the product ultimately, which is the difficult part of what we're doing.
And how do you guys make your money? How do you charge? Do you charge per insert? Do you charge a flat fee as a SaaS platform and then add a per piece fee to that? How do you guys currently charge for your services?
Yep. So generally it's a flat subscription fee. Starting price is at $99 a month. And then you've got the hardware components outside of that. We can introduce you to managed print providers and cardstock and ink and all of the relevant information. On the enterprise side, we do sometimes follow a managed print model where we're just charging per piece and we're handling everything for them. So that's the hardware, software, cardstock, ink, all of everything they need to make it super easy. But then you've also got the brand that's just getting started and wants to do the $99 a month plan and wants to buy their own printer from eBay because it's slightly cheaper, but they're following our recommended model and they're sourcing their own cardstock from a local printer. So generally it's a software fee. You've then obviously got the cardstock, ink, and other cost components. But overall, as an all-in service, you're roughly looking at somewhere between 10 and 20 cents per insert. And that's inclusive of all of the costs that you might outlay for this type of service.
Wow, sounds actually very, very reasonable. And then I guess you would also be selective. You wouldn't necessarily be sending a personalized insert for every single customer, right? You're going to segment and you're going to say, okay, it's appropriate for this customer to receive a personalized insert, but maybe not this customer. Maybe it's down to order value. Maybe it's down to how many items in a parcel. Maybe it's down to a number of different factors that create the segment that defines which customers receive a personalized insert. Do you find customers doing that level of segmentation and not sending a personalized insert?
Generally, it is going inside every order, but the segmentation is in the way that you describe, and it's prioritized based on the customer type. So maybe first we're looking at first-time customers. We're then looking at customers that have spent over a certain threshold. We're then maybe looking at those that haven't left a review for a product, looking at those that have joined or not joined an app or loyalty scheme. And then we are almost always offering a default template, which has their first name personalization and has brand and founder-led messaging. There's kind of twofold reasons for that. One is that the tool is powerful enough where really you build out this list of your priorities and segmentation, and there aren't a lot of orders left that don't fit some of that criteria one way or another. And then two, from a fulfillment perspective, if you're not going to put this in every order, suddenly the picker packer needs to start thinking and follow a different process for some of a brand's orders versus another. And most of the time, if we're looking at, okay, 10% of my customers don't meet the insert criteria I've currently got set up, but I'd need to build a WMS workflow to make sure our picker packers know that 10% of orders don't need an insert. Actually, we want to include the first name personalization to everyone and want to deliver that messaging one way or another. Because even if a customer for one order doesn't meet some criteria, they probably will do for the next one and or the next one. There's always always some initiative that reaches the bottom of that tree.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. And I guess if you're already heavily segmenting your customer base in a Klaviyo or in a Yotpo or in some other segmentation engine of some variety, or going even one step further, if you've got a CDP in play that goes above and beyond the segmentation that your standard marketing automation tool would take, then I guess it makes sense at that point to everybody falls into some segment somewhere. So that's the reality, even if it's a segment of a cohort of 10. That makes a lot of sense. And what do you guys think do you guys have any competitors in market, or do you feel like you are doing something that is so completely novel and new in the commerce world that you go, hey, look, it's pretty green fields at the moment. We don't really feel like we have any competition. Then secondarily, do you geo-target, meaning, okay, our first focus is UK and Europe, then we're going to start working with 3PLs in the US, and then we're going to start working with 3PLs in LATAM or whatever it is? Do you have a geographic focus initially? And do you think that this is a greenfields operation for you guys?
Sure. So there's a couple of competitors, but most of them are focused on the retail, larger storefront markets, the more sort of historic categories that are doing mail catalogs, other systems. We're one of the only that I know of that is focused specifically on Shopify, as well as making use of the vast amount of data that we now have on customers through different marketing apps, as well as integrations with new age WMS systems. So there isn't much competition. I think, it's ultimately a market education piece for everyone. So to a certain extent, I'd almost, not that I welcome competition necessarily, but I think it's an awareness piece, and that's the biggest challenge for us right now, rather than trying to win against a different product. And then in terms of our market, so I've got a UK accent, obviously. I've been speaking in US dollars. So about 80% of our business is in the States. So I work US time zones, our team's dotted all around the place. But that's really given us an advantage in kind of building the platform to a certain extent, because we've really optimized for remote setup and support. So we can get onboarding with a new brand and get them end-to-end tested and live in their operations function within a 30-minute setup call. So that's been really impactful for ops teams. And I think just shows to a certain extent the ease of use of the product for 3PLs and operators. Not that we're not focused on other markets. So we've got UK, Europe. We've also got customers in Australia. One of them just referred us a bit of business with a UK 3PL, which is really nice to see, and random, really weird timing. But yeah, we've got customers all over the place, mostly US focus. Never going to say no to UK or European customers or anywhere else, really.
Love it. Love it. Amazing stuff. I love what you've done. I love kind of anything to do with personalization. I feel, especially personalization at scale, feels like something that is really important, especially in the age of agentic buying. We're now getting into a scenario where it's going to become harder and harder to personalize the shopping experience. And as a result, because it's now an agent doing the shopping on behalf of the consumer, we're not there yet, but as MCP becomes standardized across the stack, and as agentic level buying, or at least agentic level shopping, starts to become much more of the norm over the next, say, 5 years, now all of a sudden, a Nosto, for example, doesn't help me much in a scenario where maybe I'm personalizing the information I give back to an agent, but it's not giving a physical human being the warm and fuzzies, right? Whereas obviously when a person has still got to be there to receive the parcel. And so it feels like this is maybe one of the last stands, so to speak, of personalization across the customer journey that, is not going to go away anytime soon. And so we're not going to have an agentic recipient of our goods. We're going to actually be receiving our goods. So it feels like this is a unique play, even in an agentic world, right?
Yeah, I think personalization was the buzzword probably before agentic AI. And we're trying to operate ultimately in both of those landscapes. Personalization to start, but we're in a really good market timing in terms of the saturation of digital channels. as well as ultimately fighting for the primary inbox. When we're actually looking at a moment where an actual customer they're thinking about the brand, they're hearing the doorbell ring and they're thinking, oh, that's my order that I placed the other day. They're excited. They're opening their product. They're seeing the personalized insert as the first touch point. And ultimately, we think that's going to be the most impactful touch point for a customer to engage with a brand, as well as the products that they've purchased. But then as a future vision, I think agentic and one-to-one personalization is going to be happening for every software tool out there. And I love the vision of a one-to-one printed insert for each customer, where we're looking at the data and aggregating the data that a brand has on all of their customers. And then we're just creating dynamic recommendations for each customer in real time. So I think ultimately that's the vision of any sort of personalization software. We're delivering it at a really cool touch point, which isn't going to get saturated or minimized in the way you're describing, I guess, at least until robotics meets the software equivalents.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. Super exciting times. Now, as we start to come down to the end of our time together, how do you like people to get a hold of you? I'll drop your LinkedIn link into the show notes as well as your website link into the show notes. But other than that, if somebody wants to reach out to you, if you're a brand and you want to personalize the unboxing experience to the nth degree using Yuzu, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
For sure. Yeah. So LinkedIn works well. You can also email me at Dru, DRU at Yuzu, which is YUZU. Ultimately, if you've got our website link there, you can also SO platform and have a play around with things. We've got a product tour there to get in touch with us if you are interested.
I love it. I love it. Now, thank you so much for your time. An hour has absolutely flown by. Now we're at the point where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question. Any question you like. It can be personal or professional. Mr. Dru Carpenter from Yuzu, what is your question for me today?
How did you feel when you got your VIP welcome box?
It was really cool. I loved it. And to be honest, what was super interesting is what was super interesting about it is it felt totally brand native, meaning that it felt like that Yuzu wasn't a part of this experience, meaning that it was fully the brand's, it was definitely a branded experience. It fit with everything that was in the box. It was obviously all the products inside of it were branded for you, which makes sense. So it was, in that sense, it was like a gift box that came from Yuzu, but it was definitely, I didn't feel like there was two companies involved, is what I'm saying, in the experience. It felt, okay, cool. This was the intent of the brand. Everything that was in here was hand-selected for me. The message was hand-selected for me. Everything felt totally native to the unboxing experience. It didn't feel like there were partners involved in this experience, is what I'm saying.
Yep.
And that's what I loved about it, is that the brand shone through in everything that was in the parcel, not just the insert in the parcel. And that, to me, is probably the coolest part of the experience, is that it's totally transparent. If a brand was concerned that effectively you're trying to promote your service through a delivery that you're doing on their behalf, no, that's not how it is here. And I would assume that on the printed insert or something like that, it's not going to say created by Yuzu at the bottom of it or something like that. It's totally tailored for that brand and for that individual delivery. And so I guess that would be the thing I would say to brands out there who were thinking of taking you on, is this really does feel 100% native in the way that it works with those deliveries. And that's something that I really like.
Got it. For context for the audience, yeah, this was a VIP box I sent to Jason, which was a collaboration with one of our early customers called FreshSense. I get asked every time someone sees one of the boxes on socials where they can purchase equivalents. So freshsense.com is the customer here. They're a flower delivery service. And if you order from them with a gift message, you might just receive a personalized insert from Yuzu. A lot of our brands have actually found us through them directly, so couldn't shout them out more.
Wow. Absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for your time. Fantastic conversation. I learned a ton. Love what you guys are doing. Wish you every success. I'll be doing a post soon about that parcel that I did receive. I wanted to get the podcast recording under the belt, but then I can tease the podcast coming out with a post about the amazing merch that I received from you and FreshSend. So thank you so much for your time, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.